Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Welcome one and all to the SB Nation NFL show. Today is Monday, following Sunday's Week 4 action across the National Football League. We're going to get into all of it, but before we do, a quick reminder that this show is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNFL for a special offer when you sign up. That's code SBNFL only at DraftKings Sportsbook. You can watch the SB Nation NFL show live on the SB Nation NFL Twitter page, Facebook page. Also listen to our podcast. Search for the SB Nation NFL show wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, leave a rating, write a review, and you can hang out with us all throughout the week as we discuss our favorite sport in the world. My name is RJ Ochoa from SB Nation's Blog of the Boys, home of the 3-1 Dallas Cowboys. Joining me here, whose team is also 3-1. We have, by the way, the fantastic Rachel Prevet on the 1s and 2s. Maybe not her team, but her team is 4-0 in the Philadelphia Eagles. But of the 3-1 Kansas City Chiefs from SB Nation's Arrowhead Pride, he has the best looking hair both sides of the Mississippi. He is decked in orange and black, ready for the end of the month that we just started. The one and only Pete Sweeney. Pete, welcome to the SB Nation NFL show. Thank you for being so beautiful and wonderful in every single thing that you do.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. What a Sunday of football. I mean, I don't really know if we know anything about how this year is going to turn out still, and that's the beauty of it. And what I got to tell you, RJ, is the NFC East through a quarter of the way.
NFC Beast
is the best division in football. So that just
who would have thought?
Show.
Look at us.
We don't know. Why do we even do shows in the summer? It's just we don't know anything. So
imagine not being 3-1. I mean, like I can't imagine what that life would be like. There's a lot of teams on the wrong side of that line. We'll talk about them obviously as we get through here. But as we do every Monday version of the SB Nation NFL show, we venture into the SB Nation universe, Pete. And speaking of 3-1, from the now 3-1 Buffalo Bills of SB Nation's Buffalo Rumblings, you know him, you love him. He is our friend here at the SB Nation NFL show. It is JSpence, the king, to talk about Buffalo's 23-20 dub over the Baltimore Frauds.
Oh, hell, the king.
He's JSpence, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a few weeks since we last spoke. So how are you doing? And what was the last thing that you ate?
Man, well, I'm good after a nail biter. I wasn't good during the game, but I'm good now. And the last thing I ate, I actually had a fried chicken sandwich with egg on it in the airport.
Ooh, wow. Dude, good call. Good. All right, well done. So the Baltimore Ravens survive. The Buffalo Bills survive. The Baltimore Ravens really bad at surviving. Another huge blown lead for the Ravens. I will say, this is maybe the most impressive Buffalo win in a while. To come back, in this chaos. I mean, like this is a different kind of win than, just blowing teams out left and right. I mean, early on, this was a crazy noon slate of games, by the way. There was all sorts of there was like 3 games in the afternoon. They all sucked. So it's hard to keep tabs on everything, but you look over and the Bills are down early and you're just thinking, oh man, they're going to go out with a whimper after the Dolphins lost last week. What's going to happen? Are we going to kind of lower them in our power rankings? But Josh Allen digs in. Jamison Crowder, I believe, has the ankle issue. Now he's gone indefinitely. But this was a very impressive Buffalo performance overall, JSpence.
Yeah, it was everything first that, all the growth that we've seen from Josh over the last couple of years. You still he hasn't had that marquee comeback game. And, last year against the Bucs, we kind of made a comeback, but we still fell short. And then obviously the playoffs, the 13 seconds, which I'm sure Pete will love to talk about, but, we still kind of fell short. So going up against a former MVP like this at their home and to be able to come back from 20-3 at one point, it's a great one for Josh. And then also it shows, it shows the growth of Sean McDermott, in my opinion, as well. So I'm very overall pleased with, what the coaching staff was able to put together and, just the fight in this team.
What do you think the problem was for those first 28 minutes before this offense finally kicked into gear?
To be honest with you, so I was at the game and really just watching it. It looks like guys were just like trying to play faster than what the game was in a way. And it's like, they weren't actually catching the ball. They were running before they caught the ball several times. Right. Devin Singletary dropped a couple. Dawson Knox dropped. So I think it comes down to one of those things where it's like, okay, let's just get our nerves out the way, calm down. We know it's a big game. We know, it's obviously not Sunday Night Football, but we know most of the nation's watching. Okay, we get it. But just breathe, just calm down. And I think once they did that, you see the defense didn't give up anything in the second half. We shut them down. This is the third game this season that we didn't allow any points in the second half of the game. So I think that's incredible when you talk about somebody like Lamar Jackson, who can really turn it on at any point from anywhere.
You look at Buffalo's next two games. You got the Steelers, and I think we're all still kind of at a weird place with them, not knowing what to expect. And then, Kansas City, it'll be fun to hear you two chop it up certainly a couple of weeks from now. But Baltimore, they've got the Bengals on Sunday night. And so I know on our Friday show, when we were kind of forecasting these games, this was a big sort of pendulum swing, I think, for not that the Steelers are on the same plane as the Bengals, but whoever lost this game was going to fall to 2-2 and kind of be in this weird having to look in the mirror sort of place. And Buffalo's not there. That's why I do think this was kind of snatching defeat from the jaw, or victory from the jaws of defeat or whatever. And I credit Josh Allen. Jordan Poyer, hello, kind of an important player.
Big
and that's where, like,
my guy.
I think I love Josh Allen so much, and I've said that for years at this point in time, not certainly to the degree that you have, but I do feel like when you have an amazing player like that, and Pete would know this with Mahomes, it overshadows other great players, and people kind of forget, like, hey, this dude is awesome too, and that was a big reason here. Like, I still think the Ravens are awesome, and Jordan Poyer helped lead a Bills defense that shut them down in the second half. To your point.
Yeah. So first, shameless plug here. Pay my guy Jordan Poyer, Buffalo, please. Like, let's keep this guy around. But I'm just saying, like, I understand that he's getting older, and I understand that it's one of those things where typically once you hit a certain age, teams are like, let's stay away from long-term contracts. I'm not saying sign him to an 8-year deal, but he's clearly not slowing down. He was an All-Pro last year. He's on pace right now for 17 I know he won't get 17, but he's on pace for 17 interceptions this season. And, when you have a secondary right now that's young because of injuries, Trey White's not there, Micah Hyde's not there. So you're playing with Jaquan Johnson, you're playing with a couple rookies out at the cornerback position, and then Jordan Poyer comes and does this. Like, come on, like, give the guy his due. And, it's just, from a fan perspective, it's a little frustrating to finally have, like, these guys that play on this level, and then it's like, okay, we'll think about it at the end of the season, when he was an All-Pro last year. But to your point, he played a phenomenal game, and the first point I want to bring up, though, is what you talked about with Josh and Patrick Mahomes and the other quarterbacks. I think you're right. There's so many good quarterbacks at this point in the league, and not just Buffalo, not just Kansas City, but there's probably 7 or 8 quarterbacks that I thoroughly enjoy watching every single week. And it gets to the point where it's difficult to keep up with everybody. But man, the NFL knows what they're doing. And these guys are practicing a lot of things at a younger age that makes them more developed, which is leading to better football. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm nervous about Pete's guy. I'm nervous in a couple of weeks. I'm not nervous about Pittsburgh. That sounds bad, but I'm not.
Sure.
I think that's the big thing right now. And just to talk to you about this, JSpence, you're probably the only other person who could feel this week. I think Chiefs and Bills fans are going to be excited about Chiefs and Bills. But then you have the Raiders and Pittsburgh, and I know we'll get to that game, RJ, with a new quarterback, and who knows the juice you can get from a quarterback. Like, the Chiefs shouldn't overlook the Raiders, and the Bills shouldn't overlook the Steelers. Before we get to that game, I want to go back to that stat that we were talking about, and we were just making fun of the fact that we overlook other players when the quarterback is so good. But Josh Allen had been 0-7 in his career when trailing by 17 or more points. And you talked about it a little bit already, but I just want to dive deeper back into it. How important was this win for him confidence-wise? Because he's considered among the elites, and I feel like if you're going to be one of these elite guys, you got to be able to come back from deficit. So how important do you think was this for his confidence in that realm?
Yeah, for his psyche, I think it was huge, because like I mentioned, the game against the Bucs last season, the game against the Chiefs, and then you mentioned 0-7. So what happens is now, in Buffalo, there was a narrative, and also I'm guessing around the national media as well, there's a narrative that, hey, Josh Allen loses close games. The Buffalo Bills have lost their last several close games, and unless they blow somebody out, they can't win. That matters. That absolutely matters when you want to be considered as an MVP candidate, or when you want to be considered as a top 3 quarterback in this league. So now what this did was going against somebody like Lamar Jackson. Again, we've seen Lamar Jackson put up big numbers. We've seen him. I know there are people who don't think that he's not the quarterback that Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes is. Fine. But guess what? He wins games, and he figures out how to do it. So to win a game like that against him in Lamar's home, or at Lamar's home, it's a huge deal. And I think what this hopefully will do is you'll start to see another level of confidence from Josh Allen going forward. And hopefully, like you said, not to overlook Pittsburgh, but hopefully when we do find our way out to Arrowhead, hopefully it shows.
Speaking of Pittsburgh, JSpence, I've never, like, I was closing my eyes when you were talking a little bit. You sound like Mike Tomlin. I've never really connected that until this moment. Have you ever been told that before?
Yeah, a lot.
I was gonna say, but
you need to get some Steelers gear this week and do a video spoof.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you've got an opportunity this week for some great content.
I love Coach Tomlin. Yeah,
he's great. I saw Peter King refer to the Steelers, by the way, this morning as the men of Tomlin. So that was a new one for me. But anyway, on the subject of that, so forecasting, the Chiefs game is massive, obviously, right? Like, we're all aware of that. But after that, I mean, a lot has been made, JSpence, about the Bills' start to their season. Okay, you got the Rams, defending Super Bowl champion, vanquish them. I think a little bit too much was made about, like, oh, you got to play the number 1 seed from the AFC last year. Like, we all know the Titans are kind of frauds. But still, and then, oh, whoa, your week 3 game is this surprising Dolphins team in this, like, super hot environment, whatever. And now the Ravens. And so, okay, I know you don't want to overestimate the Steelers or underestimate them. But that's kind of a nice little, preview or layup before the Chiefs game. But after that, I mean, I have to imagine that, like, from Halloween on, you're feeling pretty good. I mean, you got the Packers on Sunday Night Football. Granted, it's Aaron Rodgers, but still not a great team. The Jets, the Vikings, the Browns. I believe that's before Deshaun Watson returns. I hate to factor that into this. And then the Lions, the Patriots, the Jets again. I mean, like, it is all the way downhill after the bye, I feel like, as far as intensity of the schedule. So to get through this has got to feel really good.
It doesn't, but then again, not to overlook Pittsburgh, but that Kansas City game is the one that is like, okay, we have to show up for this game because, like you mentioned, all of those games afterwards, it's almost expected that we win those games. Even the Green Bay game, I don't think Green Bay is the team that we're used to seeing from Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, I know he's Aaron Rodgers, but his connection with the receivers isn't there. The defense hasn't been, they almost lost to the backup in New England yesterday. That's just not something that we're used to seeing from that team. So the Kansas City game, I think, is huge for our mental. I think is huge for the fan base, in general. But for the rest of the season, I think you want to have that win along with the defending Super Bowl champion win and in the number 1 seed. You want that because we're not going to have that game again headed before the playoffs. Those games aren't going to be there. So no, I think this is an absolute must win for both teams. Maybe Kansas City doesn't look at it that way because they've been there before, but Kansas City is our Detroit Pistons. If we're going to call ourselves the Bulls or, Kansas City is our Detroit Pistons. We have to beat them. And until we do, they're the guys that, they're the team.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think in a game like last year, we don't need to talk about how many seconds they were and whatnot. I feel like you can only truly get over that until you go and beat that team. And so I know that the Bills are looking at week 6 as a playoff game. I think the Chiefs should be looking at it as a playoff game. I know it feels like a little slightly more important for the Bills just because they haven't been able to get over that Kansas City hump. But what I'd say, and I think a lot of people would agree right now, is these look like the 2 best teams in the AFC, just considering you've got these other teams. Everyone has 1 loss. There's only 1 undefeated team in the league, and it's in the NFC. So I guess I'll close my last question with this. RJ, I don't know if you have another one, but what do you need to see next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers to give you confidence that the Bills can come into Kansas City and take care of business?
To be honest, and all my friends and loved ones in Pittsburgh, this is not a slight, but my expectation is that the Buffalo Bills come in and embarrass this team. I need to see you go into Pittsburgh or go back home and have Pittsburgh come into Western New York and you dominate. From the very first snap to the end of the game, I don't want to. We've started off slow in the first half for a bunch of our games. Actually, I feel like every game we've started off slow. We scored on the first drive, but it just hasn't been like we've gone in either tied or very close into the half. I want to dominate from the beginning to the end. I want Josh Allen to sit the 4th quarter like he did against Tennessee. This is what I need to see. And I know that probably sounds, but when you look at the 2 teams right now, when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially with the possibility of Pickett starting now, going against a rookie quarterback who is good, I think he's going to be good, but going against a rookie quarterback making his first potential start, this defense needs to confuse him, And Josh Allen needs to go out there and show that he's Josh Allen. So on both sides of the ball, I just think we need to dominate completely. And if we don't see domination, I get it. It's still an NFL professional team. But no, to go confidently into that next week's game against the Kansas City Chiefs, I need the Buffalo Bills to be riding high.
Not to pick at an old wound, but I would love to see, was it Nathan Peterman against the Chargers for the Bills?
Yeah.
That was like 6 turnovers or whatever, like in the first half, like something like that. You know what I mean? Like everyone, like I don't know what the line's going to be, or maybe you already have something up. Like,
RJ's a big Pickett hater. As it turns out, I didn't know that about him.
It's got to be like massive, like just end.
It was a 14 points.
That's amazing. Like break their will, destroy the Steelers forever. Whatever happens with the Bills this week and in the future.
The Steelers did to RJ.
Check out Buffalo. They beat the Cowboys in 2 Super Bowls, so I harbor that hatred forever. JSpence the King on Twitter. Check out BuffaloRumblings.com for all the latest in the world of the Bills and Bills Mafia. JSpence, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you destroy the Steelers and the Chiefs. I hope your next 2 weeks are wonderful.
Thank you, sir. Pete, I look forward to speaking with you, man. We'll have to do a space or something coming up soon here.
I feel good about that. Yeah, let's connect.
Let's get it. Thank you.
Thanks, JSpence. Pete Sweeney, what was the last thing you ate? JSpence had that sounded delicious, by the way, a fried chicken and egg sandwich in the airport. What was the last piece of food you put into your body? You had the Sunday night game, which is always a bit of a gauntlet. You've sometimes got to go the fast food route. Is that what you did?
No. So I got out of the local NBC station. I think it was like midnight, 12:15. Shouldn't have did it. I'm trying to not gain my usual NFL season 10, but I went over to the Insomnia Cookies and got myself a pack of cookies, threw them down, and then went to sleep for a couple hours and woke right back up and went back to the TV station. So I'm not the epitome of health at the moment, RJ. I'll tell you
that's I feel you. I don't know if you saw this. I made a vow to eat half of a cheesecake during our post-game show at Blog on the Boys. Had the Cowboys won, and they did. It's been a costly 24 hours. I'll just say that.
I feel like you're in okay shape for eating half a cake. Did you complete the cake?
I ate half of it. Yeah. It had a strawberry glaze on top, so it was okay. I'm still kind of a novice at the cheesecake game. I actually wish it hadn't. Like that made it a little bit like I was speaking. I was doing the post-game show while eating. That was the whole bit. So it made it very like.
What made you decide cheesecake? I feel like for the Cowboys, it should have been.
It's a bit of a running bit. You know what I mean? So we don't have time for that. We got to get to a lot of games here, Pete. So shout out to JSpence.
Okay, a lot of questions for you off air. After this.
Yeah. We'll text. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, sure.
So all right, Pete, spin the wheel and tell us where we're going to next, and then we'll dance. So ready?
How about the overtime game between the Green Bay Packers and the New England Patriots?
That was said with so little energy. The Green Bay Packers defeated and outlasted Bailey Zappi 27-24. The final score at Lambeau Field. Aaron Rodgers spoke about this after the game, Pete, and said that this type of winning is not sustainable. And I agree with him entirely. The Packers are headed to London this coming week to play at the home of your Tottenham Hotspur against the New York Giants, a matchup of 3-1 teams, but they got there with this win over the Patriots. Rodgers finished 21 of 35, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick 6 to a rookie. So your thoughts on the Packers of Green Bay or the Patriots of New England?
Well, Rodgers is right. Not that I agree with everything he says nowadays, but they had 443 net yards in this game. And what's weird is if you really watch some of the highlights and you dig into it, they just didn't look good. I understand that the numbers looked all right, but they just did not look like a team that will go deep into the playoffs. And this is a team that has made the playoffs and been disappointed now 2 years running. And I think he's right. And I'll even take it a step further. I sort of feel like it's his very public, indirect plea for the Packers to sign Odell Beckham Jr. I think he really wants that to happen. It makes the most sense. I firmly believe, and you'll maybe roll your eyes at this. I don't care if you roll your eyes, RJ. I think Odell going to LA instead of Kansas City swung the champion of last year. I think if Odell was in Kansas City, the Chiefs won the title. I think because he was in LA, they won the title. And he's that good of a player. And look, we haven't really seen him and his recovery. We know he's recovering. We know that the timetable is end of October, early November. But this getting Odell in Green Bay, and assuming that he does look the same as he did at the end of last year, would change the game, because the offense it does feel like one elite-ish receiver, Devontae Adams like receiver away from being someone who can make a lot of noise in the NFC. And I think that was my takeaway from this game. Like, they almost lost to the Bailey Zappi, right? Like, who even is that? Who is that? Right? Like, how does that? How did you almost lose when you have Aaron Rodgers?
I saw he is the first rookie quarterback, or was the first rookie quarterback to complete a touchdown pass this season. And this is the latest that a rookie like this is the longest it's taken a rookie quarterback to throw a touchdown in since 2000 or something. It's been a hectic day, obviously, but that's wild. I mean, I'll say this. Like, I actually agree with most of what you said, that Odell swing thing, whatever. But like, I agree with Aaron, and I agree with your agreement on him that it's hard to find things to agree with him on. Yeah, like, you can't win this way. That's like my take about the Cowboys right now. Like, yeah, sure, elite defense and holding teams and whatever, lackluster offense is kind of not sustainable. Like, everybody knows that. But if you're winning, at least you're kind of figuring things out as we go along. And maybe you argue like, well, this is still kind of their preseason, right? Like, they didn't, they don't play in the preseason. They need a month to kind of get together. Well, we're at that point though, right?
The good teams. Like, good teams win and they're just happy with the win. Great teams win and they may be unhappy with the win because they know they can't win this way in the postseason when you're facing the best teams every week. And I think that's a case here with Aaron Rodgers.
Right. And my bigger takeaway, like my biggest takeaway, is Aaron, just stop. Like, stop with, like you mentioned, rolling eyes. Stop rolling your eyes. Stop speaking dismissively about your rookie receivers and mistakes. And this is such, we talk about bad energy, bad vibes all the time. Like, he is the king of everyone else is the problem. Like, poor me. How dare the Green Bay Packers, who didn't know what I was going to do for 2 whole years, not do everything in their full and absolute power to make my life as comfortable as possible. So my point, I guess, is some of this is on him. I mean, I just can't, see how Aaron is this huge victim here. I know you're not saying that. It's just a weird, clunky, awkward situation. I saw Justice Mosqueda, who obviously covers the Packers packing company around here, noted that teams who have scored 75 points or fewer through the first 4 games of the season in the last decade, of those teams, 9 of 72 made the playoffs. So 72 teams have scored 75 points or fewer through the first 4 weeks of the season. 9 of them have gone on to make the playoffs. 3 of those 9 actually won a playoff game. And I can tell you about one of them because it was the 2018 Dallas Cowboys, who were one of those 3. And their offense was so broken, so lackluster, that they had to trade for Amari Cooper, and that had to save them. So to your point, yeah, this needs some sort of infusion, but this is the bed that the Packers made.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't love Rodgers' general attitude, and it seems like he hates his employer. He just hates going to work and hates the people he's working with. And man, I'll tell you, that stuff matters. It really does, especially again in the postseason when you're playing good teams every single week, and it's conversations that should be happening behind closed doors that he brings to the public, and that isn't sustainable. And just to double up on the point about Rodgers and caring about the team and how he wants to spread blame elsewhere, this is a team that could be undefeated. You didn't really take the offseason seriously again. You barely played in the preseason, and you got smacked in week 1. I mean, you'd have such a leg up on the rest of the NFC if you had just been prepared against the Minnesota Vikings, who have been up and down in that week 1 game. And look, it's not like my point is, it's not like you're doing everything in your power to make sure that this team is a contender. And it just, that annoys me. It annoys me when you act like that after a game.
Quickly on the Patriots side of this, this is spiraling a little bit out of control. You know what I mean? This is bad. I mean, some of it is hey, your starting quarterback's hurt, your second quarterback gets hurt. Shout out to Bailey Zappi, who played well, whatever. But I mean,
no offense, is Mac Jones that much of a world beater that, I mean, of course it's better than Brian Hoyer, but is it so vast of a difference that it should matter?
It shouldn't, but they're in a bad place. And next up for them, for the Patriots, that are the Detroit Lions, who are scoring 1 million points a game. They're not winning all those games, but they're scoring 1 million points a game. That's just, this is one of the worst Patriots teams that ever live in our adult, even overall lives, right? This team is really, really, really bad.
I agree. It's the worst Bill Belichick team in a long time. and you don't really see a scenario in which they make the playoffs. You can't see this team at this point. I mean, it's early, and man, things change. We're on here, and we can get to the Cowboys game next if you want, but we were on here and said the Cowboys season was over, but it's just hard to see a scenario in which New England turns it around.
Well, before we get to the Cowboys, let's go to the 3-1-3. You know what that is? You seen it, Mal?
Yeah.
Not everybody knows. I've made that joke a lot. Not everybody gets it.
Yeah.
I want to read you the opening line of Jeremy Reisman, who covers the Lions for us at Detroit, of his post-game recap. This is it. All right, here we go. By the way, the Lions lost to the Seahawks 48-45. Here we go. If you were hoping the Seattle Seahawks, a team averaging just over 17 points a game, would be a nice bounce-back game for the Detroit Lions offense, I come with terrible news. This was, I said, Pete, on Friday's show here at the SB Nation NFL show, we're so into narratives, right? And I said, okay, Lions, you want us to take us seriously. You want to be this real darling, this real team that we can talk about as like a playoff contender, as a wild card. Hey, you're still in Aaron Rodgers' division. That's so hard to get over, blah, blah, blah. Then bounce back from the tough loss against the Minnesota Vikings last week. Prove to us that you're legitimate. This Seahawks team, I don't think either of us really long-term believes in. I know there's the stat floating around about Geno Smith compared to Russell Wilson through the first 4 weeks of the season. We both know this Seahawks team is bad. This is the same old Lions. You cannot tell us that you're different, that you've grown, that you've improved if you're going to come out and you can't say fell flat because the offense was all over the place, but you can't lose. You can't, you're a little brother franchise if you lose this game, and that's who the Lions still are, unfortunately.
When you went into this game and you saw some signs by Detroit, if you had to guess the score of this, I think a lot of us would have agreed, man, it really feels like the Lions are going to win this 31-10, something like that, where they'll be in control of the game. The offense is going to look good. The Seattle Seahawks are in this transition mode year. Man, they almost scored 100 points total. This was,
the over-under was like
shootout.
The over-under was like 51 points. And again, the final score was 48-45.
How does anyone predict anything that happens in the NFL? This came out of nowhere. Rashad Penny, 151 yards. Geno Smith, who to me still has the line of the year when they wrote him off, but he didn't write back. And look, he has the Seattle Seahawks in a position where their year isn't over, and Detroit is looking down the barrel of a 1-3 record, and you're like, man, is this just going to be the same type of deal? It's not exactly the old Lions where they're just getting dominated each week, and it's very clear.
It's the older Lions. They're
getting close, but they just can't figure it out.
That's what I'm saying. This is the Stafford Megatron Lions. You know what I mean?
Right.
That you had fantasy shares of. They were cute and had some big blow up crazy games,
right.
But we're not a real team. You mentioned they almost had 100 points. There were over 1,000 total net yards in this game. Seattle with a 555 and Detroit with 520.
Like NFL blitz.
It was wild. And I don't want to hear from Lions fans, oh, well, Amon-Ra St. Brown was out. DeAndre Swift was out. You have enough offensive pieces to make this work. From a rushing standpoint, Jamal Williams, without DeAndre Swift, 19 carries, $108 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, had a 51-yard run. How are you losing this game? And holy crap, speaking of fantasy, shout out to RJ, who started TJ Hawkinson over DJ Moore in his lineup. The Hawk, this was the real Hawk in this game. Screw the Seahawks. TJ Hawkinson had 8 catches for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. His longest reception of the day, Pete, was 81 yards. I want you, these were all the longest receptions for these particular. The Lions had 4 players with at least a 20-yard reception. All right, Hawkinson had the 81-yard reception. Tyler Lockett, not a Hawk, but had a 34-yard reception. DK Metcalf had a 54-yard reception. This was just flying up and down this field. It was a lot of fun, obviously, but it's embarrassing that the Lions lost this game. It really, really is.
Don't hassle the Hawk. And there was a lighthearted moment at the end of this game where Metcalf, who had 7 receptions and 149 yards, he was carted off. Everyone was a little bit worried, and it just turns out that he had to use the restroom, RJ. So good on him for being healthy and regular. And the Seahawks,
maybe some of those cookies passing their way through.
They're my team, right? They're my team of MFM, right. And we are 2-2 now. So #go Hawks.
Including Hawkinson. Seriously, that was such an awesome performance. It was super obvious that was going to happen. Let's show some love, Pete. All right. Speaking of fantasy stuff, I executed the rare player for player on the same team trade in my league of record last week. I swapped out Garrett Wilson for Breece Hall. Breece Hall had a touchdown. Looks like it is his backfield. 17 carries for 66 yards in the score. Meanwhile, Zach Wilson, 50% completion percentage, 18 of 36 for 252 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. He caught a touchdown as well as the New York Jets got the dub over the Pittsburgh Steelers 24-20. You mentioned it, or rather JSpence mentioned it. Mitchell Trubisky was benched in this game for Kenny Pickett. That's kind of the big takeaway, even though this was Zach Wilson's return. Again, you talk about like little brother franchises or little brother moments. Like Steelers, you had to come out and win this game. I don't care that you're limited or whatever. You want to be real. Like, I am more sure than ever that Mike Tomlin's going to have a losing record below 500 for the first time ever.
The storyline in this game is for Robert Saleh to feel comfortable. The Jets had to show some kind of life, and this year, and I think this is a game I feel like in recent memory the New York Jets would lose, right? The backup quarterback comes in and it is benching the starter, and that guy ends up propelling whatever team it is to win the football game. And you're seeing, okay, maybe Zach Wilson is the guy. We've been waiting for these type of moments where you like really feel that the Jets made the right selection and that he can lead a franchise. And I think in the performance, right, the passing wasn't great, but I think there was at least that first moment of the receiving touchdown, the first quarterback in Jets history to touchdown, by the way. And now you're comfortable and looking forward to it. Congrats on the fantasy trade that no one cares about with Breece Hall getting on your team. But I think the biggest storyline of this, right, is we had heard Mitch Trubisky was rebuilt. Mitch Trubisky turned into Mitch Trubisky for a year, and behind the scenes, working with Brian Dable, he was going to come back, be Trubisky 2.0. The Steelers have realized that it's not going to be the case, and Mike Tomlin made, to me, the shrewd move and saying, okay, we need some kind of life here, and they put Kenny Pickett in. They need to come out this week, and Mike Tomlin knows football way better than both of us, obviously, and he's going to make the call that he wants. But in my opinion, what he should do is come out and say, no, Pickett's the guy. Move forward. We know what Rich Trubisky is, which is a Chase Daniel career backup. And it was a mistake by the Bears. It is what it is. He's not terrible. He's not bad for a few spot start games to keep your season afloat like the Cowboys are going through right now. But he's a backup. So find out, like the Jets did with Wilson, if Pickett is your guy moving forward. And he did. I mean, he had 3 interceptions, but he did inject a little bit of life into the Steelers. He made it a game where it wasn't a game before he entered it. And I'm curious as to, after this guy gets a few games under his belt, will he feel a lot more comfortable? Will he look a lot better? And JSpence was right before he departed from the show. The Bills is quite the test, but it doesn't matter. You might go into that Buffalo game and be like, okay, this is too big of a game for Pickett. No, man. I mean, he's gonna have to play these games eventually, right? If you think he's the guy, so throw him in the fire.
You mentioned that Zach Wilson was the first quarterback in Jets history to catch a touchdown. I haven't seen anything on this, but I have to figure that Kenny Pickett might be one of the first players in NFL history to have every single pass in his debut game with like some sort of minimum. He threw 13 passes, be caught. He was 10 of 13 with 3 interceptions. So like every pass he threw was caught by somebody. In this game, fun fact. I think the Steelers, Pete, just to wrap up on them. So everybody always connects them to the Giants, like the Rooney Mara stuff, right? Whatever. The Giants, I think, broke through the sort of phase that the Steelers haven't yet. The Giants reached rock bottom and said, we have to stop. We have to stop this kind of like chasing meaningless stuff. You know what I mean? And the Steelers just you've got to do it, man. You've got to wave the white flag. You have to surrender. I know it's not like the Min of Tomlin way or whatever. And I know TJ Watt is out and things like that. This season has to be about evolving, learning, growing, developing. You've got to devote all attention this year to Kenny Pickett and George Pickens, who looks great, had a 100-yard game, Najee Harris. I mean, and getting this defense sound so that next year you're ready and you're ready to rock. You're not at that place right now.
At least you'll know, right? And like the San Francisco 49ers went through this a little bit with Trey Lance, where you didn't really know because you didn't play him, right? So look, you're probably not making the postseason this year. It's probably going to be the first year in 20 that Mike Tomlin is under 500, which is still very impressive. I mean, this is what happens when you have to go through a quarterback transition. But find out who Kenny Pickett is. Put him in this Buffalo Bills game and see if he can manage to make it a game. See if maybe he can pull off a win. We've seen some weirder things that have happened this year in the NFL. And so I think it's exciting in Pittsburgh. I think they found out who Mitch Trubisky is. I am eager to hear if they will move forward and push him as Pickett as the starter. I tend to think they will. And the Jets, to me, are a team that is keeping that solid regime afloat in a sense, and we'll see how they can build upon it as well.
This was, to me, their first real win. And I know you can kind of poke holes in the Jets a little bit this year. You beat the Browns in this game that was impossible to win, that you were the one of 1,000 teams that happened to sort of win that game. And then you were fortunate that the Steelers changed. I don't know the success rate of teams who change quarterbacks mid-game, but it can't be great. But still, Robert Saleh, he had the silly we're keeping receipts argument, whatever, or line. And you're right. I thought he was a sneaky candidate to be one of the first head coaches fired this year, but he's keeping the ship afloat.
And this is a stretch, right? So you got the Dolphins, and we'll see if Tua plays. I tend to think he won't, so that'll be Bridgewater. But Bridgewater looked pretty good to me. And then you get the Packers, the Broncos, New England, who has had your number forever, and then the Buffalo Bills. That stretch will really tell you if you can get out of that stretch and enter your bye week. It would be 3-2. So 3-2 is 5-4. Then all of a sudden, the second half of the year is interesting. I tend to think they won't. I feel like 2-3 or 1-4 seems more reasonable to me than the New York Jets. But hey, prove me wrong.
Let's try to fly through these games. We always do this. We go long. I need a London accent or an English accent. The Minnesota Vikings.
London accent. What are you talking about here?
The cast of Ted Lasso was in attendance to see the Minnesota Vikings emerge victorious over the New Orleans Saints. A late cover by the Vikings, depending on where you look, but most places had them 2.5 3-point favorites. 28-25, the final score. Minnesota gets to 3-1, a different type of accent. Meanwhile, the New Orleans Saints fall to 1-3. The Saints, who already traded away their first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. Kirk Cousins, a modest 25 of 38, 273 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Justin Jefferson got back. This was kind of the get-right game. It took a little bit. 10 catches, $147. Just an impressive performance in a lot of different ways. He did have a rushing touchdown. That's how it was technically categorized. Meanwhile, Andy Dalton in his start for the Saints, Pete, 20 of 28, 236 yards, and a touchdown. The Saints just don't have enough. It's so clear and obvious that they're in a different league. They're in a different game with people. It was the debut of their black helmets, which looked better than I thought they would. But this just, even I believe in the Vikings, and I have a lot of questions about them long term. I'm still, here. You and I both picked them to win the NFC. But the Saints side of this is really bad. They are in the bad place.
Well, I don't know how reasonable it is to think they should win this football game when you don't have Thomas, Kamara, and Winston going. It's amazing.
Do those factors really change much? If you're screwed because you lost Jameis Winston, aren't you kind of already headed in the wrong direction?
I think in a way, but I just think it says, is it a quality win for the Vikings that it took a double doink for them to win a game when a team didn't have its three best players? I don't know how much this says about the Saints. We already knew the Saints were heading in the wrong direction, and it was going to be a tall task for them to win this game. The Vikings kind of had to escape again. And I know that they're 3-1, and I like the Vikings coming into the season. They were my pick to win the NFC.
Yeah, you look at all these words a minute ago, right?
You look at all these games that they won. I understand that they beat the Packers 23-7 in week 1, but these last two wins, they kind of had to sneak out with the victory. They almost ended up losing these games. They definitely should have won if they are the Super Bowl contender that we think they are. Good to see Justin Jefferson get back to being Justin Jefferson. This is in covering Kansas City. This is when I'll talk about this in a little bit, but this is when Kansas City gets Travis Kelce involved early. If you're the Minnesota Vikings, you got to get Justin Jefferson involved early. If you don't get him going, you're probably not going to win that week. Lean into what is the best part of your offense. And it was good to see that they did this. By the way, this morning game, I overlooked it. I was asleep, and I left Kamara and Thomas in a few leagues. So I got goose egged.
Yeah. Man, you, for someone who considers himself when I first met you, you were I'm the fantasy guy. I'm the betting guy, whatever.
8:30 a.m.
Pretty embarrassing. You're not up at 8:30. Have a kid. They'll get you. Anyway.
I didn't have to work until later in the day because of the night games.
So you tied one on Saturday night. That's what we're getting from here. The Saints next week will host the Seahawks in the battle of the would-be fraud bowl. So we'll see about that. The Vikings, meanwhile, Pete, are 3-1 and have a home date with the Chicago Bears coming up.
Well, that theme of what we were talking about earlier fits for the Vikings, where it's you're winning, but do you really feel good about these wins? Like you got to put it together.
I think this is a bigger point, but like there's the Eagles right now, and I would put the Chiefs and Bills like as far as the like teams I really trust. But outside of that, like it's an open conversation and an open competition. And so if you're the Vikings and you can win while you're figuring all this out, they're gonna get to 4-1. And after that, the week before their bye, they visit the Miami Dolphins. It feels gross to kind of like be like, well, is Tua gonna play whatever? Like obviously that's a much separate issue or a very separate issue. But like it's not inconceivable that they would be 5-1 at the bye. Like the Vikings are for, and like if they can find themselves, like you said, like get Travis Kelce involved early. If you can find that thing, which is there, it's within grasp, then the Vikings are a team to watch out for. So good for them. The Saints though, tough times. I mentioned we would get there. Let's go ahead and let's just do it now. The Dallas Cowboys 3-1, America's team after a comfortable 25-10 victory over the Washington Commanders. The Dallas Cowboys have never lost to the Washington Commanders, Pete Sweeney. They've only ever beat them in the long history between these two franchises. Cooper Rush is the first, I don't know if you saw this, first quarterback in Dallas Cowboys franchise history to win all 4 of his first starts. The only other quarterbacks who had won their first 3 starts were Roger Staubach and Jason Garrett, but Cooper now stands alone.
I think history has a way of repeating itself. I'm ready for the Dak Prescott press conference when he comes back, and he's going to get up there teary-eyed and say, look, he earned his right to be our starter.
Again, look,
how do you go away from Cooper Rush? How do you do it? Honestly, we're getting to that point.
Anyway,
how do you do it?
CeeDee Lamb is starting to kind of find himself as the alpha in this offense. 6 catches, 97 yards, a touchdown. This was Michael Gallup's first game since tearing his ACL. In the penultimate game of last year's regular season, he had 2 catches, one of them for a touchdown. By the way, Michael Gallup now on the season has as many catches as Kenny Golladay, has more yardage, and has a touchdown where Kenny Golladay does not. But Carson
Wentz Golladay stinks. I mean, let's just say
right.
it. I mean, you can say it now. He stinks.
Carson Wentz threw the ball 42 times, 25 completions, 170 yards. He had the 1 touchdown to Jahan Dotson, who does look very good and very promising, but was picked off twice, once by Trayvon Diggs, who now has multiple interceptions. Or Trayvon Diggs has streaks running against every NFC East rival. He has picked off each NFC East rival in multiple games consecutively, which is just really impressive. But this Washington team is just really bad. This was the perfect opportunity for the Cowboys to continue to keep the ship afloat. I cannot believe they're 3-0 without Dak Prescott. We'll see if Dak is back this week against the Rams. But Dallas is 3-1 and very, very much alive in the overall picture of the NFL and NFC as a whole.
Yeah, the NFC East somehow has the best record in football when you put all the records together, which is unreal because we thought the AFC West would be the best division, and it really hasn't been. And the NFC East was probably going to be among the worst again, and it really hasn't been that either. Really quickly on your Dotson point, Dotson went a little bit later in the first round after Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams hasn't taken the field yet.
They all kind of look good, though, to your point. I mean,
Dotson looks like the best so far.
Right.
And to be doing that with Carson Wentz, I think only enhances that point. And then really the biggest story, I think, of this game is just the Dallas Cowboys continue to stay afloat. A little bit different than the 3-1 that we're talking about where you're winning ugly. You're just buying time to get your starter back. I was joking, by the way, about the unless he goes undefeated, which you got to really talk about it. But anyway, so when Dak Prescott got hurt, we were talking about let's just have the Cowboys somehow be around 500. And it is looking, because of these wins that he's putting together, they're going to be close to that, if not just 1 game under. Like if he were to lose the rest, right, it would probably be about 1 game under. And that's doable to make the postseason. And when you have your quarterback that's injured for 6 weeks, you just want to make the postseason and see what happens. And the Cowboys are in excellent position to do that because of the play of Cooper Rush.
Their schedule, I mean, the Cowboys have already gotten through Tom Brady and Joe Burrow, like make of those teams at that time, which you will. They've got the Rams this coming week. I'm excited to see the Rams on Monday night. So, they get the Rams on a short week for what it's worth. They've got the Eagles next week. That's the big one, right? Like is Dak back for that Sunday Night Football? It would be epic, obviously. And then after that, they've got the Lions, who you never know what team you're going to get, obviously. And then they've got the Bears. So I think, conservatively, they're probably going to be somewhere around like 5-3 at worst at the bye. But then after the bye, I mean, they've got Green Bay, who's down, Minnesota, who we just talked about. You kind of don't know where you're going to get. But from Thanksgiving on, P, I don't know if you're looking at the Cowboys schedule. Thanksgiving on, it is good times for the Cowboys.
Do the Cowboys play on Thanksgiving this year?
They host the New York Giants, your Giants, then the fraud Indianapolis Colts, then the Texans, then they're in Jacksonville. They do host
I'm
the
looking
Eagles
right now.
on
That's
Christmas Eve. Then they're at Tennessee, and who knows who's quarterbacking them then at Washington. Like it is. Look, this is a 10-11 win team in all likelihood.
Speaking of the Cowboys Giants game, it looks like that's about 3:30 Central Time.
As it is every year. Yes, thank you for letting us know the Cowboys play at 3:30 on Thanksgiving Day. Nobody knew that.
Gonna be falling asleep during that game. There's no doubt about it on the couch. Yeah.
Let's move on. I mentioned them. I want to read you a tweet before, just to kind of let you know what game we're talking about.
Okay.
This is a tweet from Zach Kiefer, who does a great job covering this team for The Athletic. I'm just going to give it away. It's Indianapolis Colts. Colts running back Nyheim Hines yesterday. This is Nyheim Hines' quote, again, is tweeted out by Zach Kiefer. Not an excuse, but every year we have a new quarterback. So each year we have growing pains while we sit here plus watch Tennessee, which has had Tannehill, my whole career? And each year we're restarting and we have to turn the page. So that sucks a little bit too, that most teams we play have an established guy, but that doesn't matter. We have figured it out and we will figure it out. Matt Ryan, Pete, I was told was light years better than Carson Wentz. I was told that Carson Wentz fumbled the ball too much, which he does. Matt Ryan has 9 fumbles through 4 games for the Indianapolis Colts, who have been outgained on the ground in all 4 of their games this season, despite having Jonathan Taylor touting him. He's going to repeat as the league's rushing champion. Taylor had 20 carries. 20 carries on Sunday afternoon against the Tennessee Titans, had 42 yards. All right, 42 yards. Matt Ryan, 27 of 37, a hollow 356 yards and 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Derrick Henry had 22 carries, a $114, a touchdown. The Indianapolis Colts falling to 1-2-1. The Titans look like the AFC South favorites yet again at 2-2.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think you maybe had been onto something about Indianapolis.
That's right.
If this experiment doesn't work, they're going to have to turn the page of this regime, and
they blamed Carson. They did.
Right.
Matt
Ryan. It's continuing to just. It's like when you have a leak in the basement, and you're like, well, we'll just put more tape on it. Eventually, that thing is gonna overflow and flood your basement, unless you actually take care of the problem, which is a hole in your damn wall. And I think you're right. And watching, again, I didn't get deep into this game, but watching Matt Ryan against the Chiefs, I know the Colts pulled it out. So trust me, I know. But he
flip on the radar for Casey.
He doesn't look like a quarterback that can really handle any sort of pressure anymore. I don't know why that was, especially against Kansas City. And when you don't have Jonathan Taylor cooking to sort of give that threat of, okay, the run game, and maybe you can work some play action there, Matt Ryan is going to be exposed, because he's just not the Matt Ryan old. He's not the MVP version of Matt Ryan.
That's what they told us. Do you remember what Reggie Wayne said in the offseason?
What?
He said that Matt Ryan looked so much like Peyton Manning that it made him want to throw up. What? That's so stupid to me. It was so dumb to believe in all this. What's even more dumb is that I would actually kind of credit the Colts if Matt Ryan was their long-term plan, or their plan all along. He wasn't. Matt Ryan became this savior for them when he wanted out, when Atlanta was connected to Deshaun Watson. They stumbled into this plan, and this looks exactly like that. This looks like they did nothing serious at the most important position in the game, and now they're like, well, it's really, I don't know if you guys know, Andrew Luck retired right before the season started 3 years ago, and so it's been really hard on us. Wake up! I mean, come on, grow up, Colts. Jeez.
On the other side, and you mentioned it, first place in the AFC South, but kudos to the Tennessee Titans, because they were 0-2, and sometimes 0-2 turns into a broken year, and you don't ever end up crawling out of that hole. And they have the Commanders next, where Carson Wentz went, and they are potentially going to go from 0-2 to 3-2, entering their early bye week. And don't forget, this is a team that was the first team in the AFC entering the playoffs last year. And for them to put it together and figure it out, I think not having A.J. Brown was going to take some getting used to, and I think they're finally finding themselves again.
Let's move on. Sunday Night Football, your Kansas City Chiefs are back. I can't believe, I don't know what the odds dipped to on things after the Colts lost, but I hope you got them then, because my goodness. And I don't know how much was the we're in Tampa, the Super Bowl, same uniforms, blah, 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 whatever. The Chiefs looked incredible. I know the Eagles are undefeated, but on Sunday night, the Chiefs looked like the best team in the NFL. Mahomes did another Mahomes thing. I saw your tweet was it LOL, what the hell? It was stupid. Mahomes was outstanding. Only, I said that sarcastically, 249 yards, had the 3 touchdowns, the 1 interception. Clyde the Glide, Isaac Pacheco, like there's a lot of good things happening here. You mentioned Kelsey. He got started off strong. There was the fortunate fumble at the beginning of the game, and then the route was on, really. I mean, just a huge, impressive dismantling of what people thought was the best defense in the NFL by the Chiefs.
Yeah, last week was a disaster, and it really made you question of, are the Chiefs for real this year? Could they even be a Super Bowl contender? Because they looked horrible. And the thing that I kept selling at Arrowhead Pride and in Kansas City, and this was trying to look at the bright side, I was like, look, of the 3 phases of football, if there was one part of the Chiefs that you want cooking, it's the defense, because the defense is always going to be the question for this team when they have Patrick Mahomes. Eventually, hate to say it, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are going to figure it out. They're that good, right? So if the defense is playing well for 4 straight games, or as of last week, 3 straight games, and they look good, and you feel confident that maybe this is a top 10 defense, you're going to be a Super Bowl contender, because eventually Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid are going to figure it out. The Bucs came in, they were only allowing 9 points per game. Again, it's just 3 weeks, but the Kansas City Chiefs made them look silly. Patrick Mahomes had another Mahomes moment. I don't know how many times that we have to go through this. And again, I know you're going to roll your eyes. Some people are going to roll their eyes.
Hey, I'm on the Chiefs. What do you mean I'm going to roll my eyes? I've been telling people about it.
Okay. Sometimes
put me in the kingdom.
You would in the past. All right. You're honorary kingdom member for now.
Thank you.
But we've gone through this so many times where maybe Patrick Mahomes has like a few weeks where he doesn't play particularly well. This guy is a human being, right? It'll happen. So you have 2 of these weeks that went back to back. And then with the Indianapolis Colts, not the greatest team in the world, you end up losing that game. Suddenly, all those Mahomes doubters come out of the woodwork, led by Skip Bayless and his stupid takes on whatever show he's on. And you forget, okay, again, this is one of the best quarterbacks we have ever seen in NFL history. And you had not only the moment of the touchdown, because I know that play's been going around, but there was a moment where he was almost sacked by Davis and still able to shimmy shake away from the pressure and float another one to Juju Smith-Schuster. It's just, I don't know. I look, this is pertinent because Tom Brady is the greatest player to ever play the game. Eye test wise, because I can't fast forward time 15 years from now to see if he'll have Super Bowl championships. Patrick Mahomes has eye test wise is the greatest football player I've ever seen. And it's a pleasure to cover him. And I think this was another chapter of the Mahomes magic highlight reel that I'll have in Canton one day.
I think the losses, the Super Bowl loss, the AFC Championship loss, I maintained it. Not enough is made about the way the Chiefs blew the title game last year. Like that was legitimate, like 20-3 territory. But again, it just kind of gets swept under the rug. I think that like I don't want to say humanize Mahomes, but at least for me, like I hated all the like he's never lost in September, like all the like glitzy, silly ways to like elevate him. He's amazing. Like we don't have to make up reasons why he's amazing. So like there's a necessary sort of realism that's been injected into him, and now he's on the way up.
He's no Cooper Rush. Rush did go undefeated in September.
On the other side of this game, just quickly, I don't know what to think of the Bucs because they kind of like it got so out of hand so quickly that it's so difficult to kind of properly gauge them off of this game. But they did kind of make it a game a little bit. In Kansas City's like in a little bit more like prevent back off mode. So again, it's hard to totally evaluate that. There's some like Rodgers tension, like, oh man, this team needs to figure this out type thing. But the Bucs are like, if there's one team who's like, what does Brady want? Brady prefers Pepsi products over Coke products. Okay, or like get the Coke products out of the building. You know what I mean? Like they will move heaven and earth for him, and I think that makes them a better organization because you should like acquiesce to what your quarterback wants. So I don't know what I think their prospects are going to be. I think they're going to be contenders. I think like the same way we didn't like harp on the Chiefs' loss to the Colts. I think don't make a big deal about the Bucs losing to one of the best teams in the NFL. I think they'll be back. I think they'll win the NFC South. That's the thing. Like their division is so bad. I mean that they'll be fine.
You're right about this not being a game where you can judge on the Tampa side because it was 21-3 before you could blink, and so the Bucs essentially stopped running the football. The Chiefs allowed only 3 rushing yards, which tied a single game franchise record. The last time they had done that was against a San Diego franchise on November 19th, 1961. So a few years before we were born.
You're older than me, so it was closer to your birth than mine.
Make sure you remind me of that. That's good. Thank you.
The LA Chargers survived against the Houston Texans. This game was 21-0.
The Chargers.
early on, wound up 34-24. Damian Pierce, I wouldn't say arrived because he'd already kind of arrived for the Texans. Austin Eckler, hello, welcome back to the end zone. 3 total touchdowns for Mr. Eckler. Justin Herbert looked healthy. Thankfully, 27 of 39, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mike Williams had 120 yards. Gerald Everett caught one of the 2 touchdowns. The other went to Eckler. He, again, had 2 on the ground. Damian Pierce, again, $131 in the rushing touchdown. I mean, just a really okay game, but I honestly leave this game, Pete, with more questions about the Chargers. Okay, you won 34-24, but you almost kind of blew this, like at the end. And I'm not putting that on anybody except Brandon Staley. Like, you can't eke out this win you can't win this game by 10 points when this team housed you a year ago, and we're having all these questions about whether you can close or not. Like, I'm still not back on the chart. I was never in. Again, honorary Kingdom member right here, but 2-2 for the Chargers feels disappointing.
I want you to remember that you're saying this in 2 weeks' time. But
look, I have check the tapes. Like, I've been all in on the idea that the Chargers love is misplaced, that we're undervaluing and underrating the Chiefs.
I think the Chargers are this team, and they've developed this identity, and it's not a good one, where you can come back against the Chargers. They're not necessarily a team that you can't rally back and make it a game late. And I just think for Houston to rally back and scare them, at a certain point, LA needs to turn inward and say, look, we got to play 4 quarters of football, right? We have to play 4 quarters. That's all
I'm saying. Right. Well said.
They should have stomped the Texans. I know it ended up being 34-24, but it was a lot closer because of the Texans' 3rd and 4th quarter rally. And Justin Herbert, when he is healthy, is among the best. And kudos to Herbert for getting it done, when it counted. At the end of the day, they won the game, which is what matters the most. But I think you're right. For them to feel like we're going to take this next step into a team capable of winning a Super Bowl, man, step on a team's throat. We haven't seen that consistently from them.
No, and when you play, like, they not only the way we talk about it, like, go blast the team, right? You're supposed to be better than them, go destroy them.
Yeah.
We not only haven't seen that from them, we also haven't seen them hang with the tough teams, right? Like, hey, you want to be taken seriously? Beat the Chiefs. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you did it last year, whatever, but not on primetime. Not when the whole world's watching. Like, I want to see more. They have enough talent that it's fair to expect more. Khalil Mack, by the way, has 5 sacks through 4 games. Like,
yeah,
it's absurd that they got him for like nothing.
We're always looking at next stretches, and so you look at the Chargers' next stretch. It goes Cleveland, Denver, and then Seattle. Those should be 3 wins if you're a Super Bowl contender, right? The Denver Broncos look like they're a joke. Cleveland and Seattle do not have the quarterback that you do. Go 3-0, and then suddenly you're 5-2 going into your bye week and are really a threat to dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC West.
Very quickly on this game, and we do have to hurry it up here. The New York Giants this was like the worst. The winner became the worst 3-1 team of all time. The Giants won 20-12.
I don't know why you're so jealous of the powerhouse that is the New York Football Giants, baby.
Oh, well, we were down on 3rd Street, and we was there, and we were watching the G-Men, and they took it to those Chicago Bears. I remember when Mike Ditka was the Bears coach. Bill Parcells took it to Mike Ditka, Phil Simms,
I call him Bada Bing Buckley. He's playing so well to 3-1.
31 carries for Saquon Barkley, 146 yards. Looks like the best quarterback on the team as well. Daniel Jones left the game with injury, had to come back because Gerard Taylor was injured. The Giants.
It's so nice to see Saquon back, though, because sometimes running backs have these injuries and they're just like never, ever, ever, ever the same again. And Saquon was so good, and he had that year where it's like, man, this guy's not right. I don't know if he'll ever be right again. And he is fully 1,000,000% back, and you can see what he can do. He basically is like, it's not Daniel Jones. They're running at everything through Saquon, and that's the reason they're 3-1. If you have to pick one reason, it's Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's really awful. If you're like, it can be awful because if you're a Giants fan, your deepest fear has to be that they're going to pay him, right? Like you're like terrified that like, you're starting anew, right? That you can see the beginnings of something different. I know, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know how they don't.
It's an awkward place to be. The Bears are so bad. The Bears stink. I mean, like PU, they stink.
Icky.
They are gross.
Ew.
Let's just leave it there. They are 2-2 now. Congrats to them, I suppose.
Does Justin Fields stink? Yes or no? Just said yes or no.
It's hard to say he doesn't.
Okay.
I'll say that. There is only one undefeated team left in the NFLP, and it is the Philadelphia Eagles. They are 4-0 thanks to their 29-21 victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was 14-0. Jacksonville early on. Jalen Hurts threw a pick 6, but then the Eagles stormed back, had 29 unanswered points. Jalen Hurts, again, looks incredible. This was the Miles Sanders game. 27 carries, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence fumbled 5 times and lost 4 of them. I don't know if you saw this.
I personally,
quickly, I don't know if you saw this. Frank Reich said after the Jaguars beat the Chargers last week, Frank Reich had a quote to Albert Breer where he said, I don't think enough people are recognize how good the Jaguars are. He was saying this to defend getting blown out by them 24-0. So I don't know how Frank Reich feels about the fact that they lost this game.
No, I don't. I'm not thrilled with what Frank Reich is doing necessarily in Indianapolis, but I sort of still agree. The Eagles won 29-21, but you mentioned it. There were 5 fumbles. 4 of them they lost, right? So let's just take half of those.
That's away. A problem. That's not like a weird fluky thing. I mean,
well, if you really watch the highlights of this game, it was pouring. Not to say that it wasn't pouring for both.
There were
teams.
some extracurriculars or some I'm not like a weather expert, but there was some impact from the Hurricane Ian obviously impacting this game and the Baltimore game as well.
Yeah, no, and I think had it not. I would love to see what this game would have looked like if it was a perfectly sunny day. I hate to give Jacksonville that cop out, but there was obviously a very clear problem with the wet football. Like maybe Doug Peterson made a mistake by not having wet footballs in practice or something this week because they were not ready for that aspect. And I wonder what the score would have been in a sunnier game. But kudos to the Eagles. They're the only undefeated team in the league. And the most impressive thing about them is not only are they doing it on offense and Jalen Hurts. Again, it wasn't the greatest game necessarily for him, but I think he is able to take advantage of what he does well, and he got it done on the ground when it wasn't really necessarily working for him through the air. But the biggest thing for the Eagles, and this is why they're the clear Super Bowl contender of the NFL, right? Like you talk about tiers where you said it's the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Bills. I'd even put the Chiefs and Bills a touch under the Eagles because A, they've won every game. And B, a lot of it is based upon their defense. And if you can defend in today's NFL against these high-powered offenses, which the Jaguars have rightfully looked like through a couple weeks of the season, then you're going to go far. And I think they're so clearly going to win their division. We'll see if the Cowboys and Giants maybe could squeak into wild card position, but they're so clearly going to win their division and maybe be the top seed in the NFC. And if they're that, it's hard to see a scenario where they're playing at home where they don't get to a Super Bowl. I don't know if it's even too early to say that, which is wild. So kudos to the Eagles for going 4-0. Again, would have loved to have seen this when the conditions were a little bit nicer.
If you are an elite offense and you can force 5 fumbles in a game, it's a pretty good recipe for victory. So Eagles have the Cardinals next week. Sneaky good game. We'll get to the Cardinals in just a bit. But before we do, a different bird of a different feather. The Atlanta Falcons beat the Cleveland Browns 23-20. I know we don't like to talk about the Browns. I don't think we're bummed that they lost. Good win for the Falcons. They're 2-2. Arthur Smith might be saving his job. This was, hey, you were kind of clutch. You had a clutch win. The Falcons did.
Yeah, I don't know. This was. I don't have a ton to say. I mean, I don't either. I'm surprised the Falcons have found themselves. I guess it's surprising, and for to be 2-2, it's just. I mean, I did not think they would be 2-2 by this point. So kudos to them for the dub.
I mentioned it. The Arizona Cardinals defeated the Carolina Panthers 26-16. Good for the Cardinals. I mean, this was way too close for way too long. But I mean,
I don't know why
this game was 10 up entering the fourth quarter.
Why is Kyler Murray that lawnmower that takes 17 pulls before he gets going in games? If he could just play sometimes as he's playing in the latter stretches of games from the beginning on, they'd be blowing out teams. It should have never really been a game.
I think we both think that Kyler Murray's peak or ceiling is capable of competing with an elite offense like the Eagles, right? Like next week's game, but not if you take 3 quarters to get going. You know what I mean? By that point, you can only come back or not come back, but you can only survive and win against a lowly team like the Panthers. Shil Kapadia tweeted this out on Monday morning, Pete. Yesterday's offensive performance based on EPA per drive by the Panthers was the worst of any team this season. There have been 126 games played to this point, across all offenses. The first 10 drives for the Panthers, 4 punts, 3 turnovers, 2 failures on 4th down, and 1 field goal. The Panthers offense ranks 31st in EPA per drive and 30th in offensive success rate. Baker Mayfield, this is some not great vibes. the way the Browns handled Baker Mayfield was really poor. We like all these things can be true, and the line about wanting an adult in the room aged very poorly for the Browns for other reasons. But you can see how an NFL franchise would not feel like Baker Mayfield is enough for their team. You know, like he is not. And this line about like, oh, did we go and score after they were booing us? Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's such a bad look for him.
I think the biggest story coming out of this game, especially with these two franchises in particular, is the hot seat power rankings update, right? Where I think it's helpful it's a helpful reminder to know that like the Arizona ownership doubled down on Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury by paying them.
And this would have to
be an absolute disaster for them to move on, right? What I'm telling you is if they could go what would be 7-10, miss the playoffs, and I bet you they're still here for one more year at least because they've doubled down going into this season. It's really tough for ownership to just give up on their investment immediately that soon. Money is still money, even though you're a billionaire. But then you look at the other side of this. Baker Mayfield seems like the wrong choice. He doesn't seem like he's a starter in the NFL. You have Matt Rule, who was already on the hot seat. We had talked about Reich. Reich will get the chance to finish this season and see it through. I'm very sure of that. But when it came to in-season potential moves, when it came to coaches, maybe we had Mike McCarthy, who was proven that
that's right.
He's going to last at least through the season, it seems.
People
Brandon
said
Staley,
the Cowboys should have hired Matt Rule over him, by the way, just so we're clear.
Brandon Staley, who is like barely doing enough, but doing enough. Like Matt Rule has become the guy who is going to be let go before the season ends, and I'm almost 100% sure of it at this point.
I said on Monday nights, this was after last week's show, Dan Quinn is going to make an excellent head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers next year. Speaking of the AFC West, let's wrap up with this one. The Las Vegas Raiders got their first win of the year. They are now 1-3 thanks to their 32-23 victory. Nice palindrome over the Broncos country. Let's rides. And
Broncos country, let's slide.
Nice.
Slide down the standings.
Josh McDaniels gets his first win as a head coach since his experience as the Denver Broncos head coach, which ended abruptly throughout the 2010 season. Josh Jacobs kind of back, right? Like we all thought that the Raiders hated him, had to fly him separately to last week's game. 28 carries, $144, 2 touchdowns on the ground.
Did he fly commercial? Or
I don't know.
Did he get a PJ?
I really don't know. But Devontae Adams led the way, 13 targets. Nobody else had more than 6, 9 catches, 101 yards. That was good enough for this Raiders team. The Denver offense woke up a little bit relative to what everybody saw last Sunday night, but was still very bad. Russell Wilson had 3 total touchdowns. One of them was on the ground. It looks like they have lost Javonte Williams. I don't want to speak too soon, but maybe for the entire season, certainly for at least some stretch of time. Melvin Gordon does not look adequate as a replacement, keeps fumbling the ball. This is to me the story. This is 2 ships passing in the night. I don't believe in the Raiders. I thought they could be a playoff team. I don't think that anymore, but I do think that they'll be, I don't call them fun, but they'll be in the mix, right? Like they'll win 8-9 games and maybe finish right outside the playoff mix. But they're I do believe the Raiders will finish more successfully with more wins than the Broncos. The Broncos are heading in the wrong direction. They had the weird 2-1 record. Like this Broncos team, talk about stinks. They stink out loud.
I had a kind of nice conversation with Tim Lynch on the AFC West mixtape, which we do once a month now, and it was last week, and he was really worried about this game because it was a Raiders team that had to be desperate. You can't go 0-4 and expect to do anything in the NFL. And the Denver team had not looked great in its wins. And really, I think if there's any 2-2 team that's out there right now that the record really doesn't fit what they've looked like, it's the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos could just as easily be 1-3 or 0-4. And that's why, you end up playing a full season and the standings will be as they go. But this Raiders team is desperate, and they should be. They need to be. They need to get back to 3-3, and it goes back and brings our whole podcast full circle. Thank you, Raiders. But this is why the Chiefs, as much as people are going to be looking forward to that Bills game the following week, cannot overlook the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. It's still a division game and a team that needs to win every week now because of their 0-3 start. It wasn't the prettiest win, but you're right. Josh Jacobs did it, and it was a win they needed, and they got it.
Speaking of Monday Night Football, 2 weeks from now, the Broncos will be on Monday night for an AFC West matchup. They'll be facing the Los Angeles Chargers. So we got a lot of AFC West Monday night action happening soon. But before that, this coming week, the Broncos have a very quick turnaround, Pete, because on Thursday night football, they will be hosting the Indianapolis Colts. You got the baby horse versus the actual horse in a battle of who is the bigger fraud. I think the Colts will win that matchup, which means the Broncos will probably win the game. But man alive, I cannot wait to tweet some disparaging things on Thursday night during this coming game. So
this game's projecting to be gross because it looks like it's two quarterbacks that just don't have it anymore, and potentially the stud running backs who everyone enjoys watching are in line probably not to play. So it's just one of these ugly
I guarantee
Thursday
you we'll get some sort of Amazon Prime boost of a stat to sell the game that's this is the most wins combined by the quarterbacks in Thursday night football history. You know what I mean? Something like that.
If you could slap me into 5 years ago and give me Matt Ryan and Russ Wilson, baby, on a Thursday night, I'd be pretty excited. This is not.
What do you think the over-under is for Thursday night football between the Broncos and Colts, according to our friends at DraftKings?
10.5.
It's at 43.5, which is pretty low.
I was about to say.
But something lower than that is tonight's game. Monday night football between the Rams and Niners is actually set at 42.5. Who wins tonight, Pete? Rams or Niners? This was the game as far as our SB Nation expert picks that we were all the most split on. Every other game had kind of a general consensus, but this game's kind of 50-50.
I just think the NFC West is still that division, especially with the Seahawks that are somehow winning games at this point. You just never know what's going to happen. So I'll say that I would think the Rams would win this game, which means the 49ers are definitely going to win some weird way.
I'm taking the Rams. Bad times in San Francisco. So it is the game in Santa Clara, whatever. But our friends at Niners Nation Turf Showtime will keep
Santa Clara to
die,
of
course.
Yeah.
Let's welcome in Rachel Prevet, who is wonderful and elegant and perfect in every single way. Doesn't ever make a mistake. Doesn't ever hurt anybody. Just lives her life and impacts people only in a positive way. Rachel, first of all,
she was a little
how
late
are you doing?
So.
Second of all, what was your big takeaway from Sunday? And third of all, who was the MVP of today's show?
Yes. Takeaways. I also had a similar take to RJ.
Don't even start.
Going into the season, looking at the Raiders, I thought that they were going to be more in the mix that they have been. So, I mean, good for them picking up their first win. The time is now to turn things around. But I still think there's a chance. So that take was kind of similar. I thought it was nice to see Derrick Henry having a pretty encouraging performance.
I gave him the shout out. That was me.
Justin Jefferson also had
me.
Nice game after he was playing kind of quiet. And I low-key disagree with Pete's take on the weather when it came to the Jaguars, only because I feel like Hassan Reddick talked about this in the post-game presser, and he was like, you can't say that because Jalen Hurts didn't have any fumbles. So I do have to disagree with that. I think that even if the weather was perfect and the sun was shining bright, I think that we would have had the same outcome.
Who's got better hair though? Jalen Hurts or Trevor Lawrence? That's what.
Trevor Lawrence's hair is there. The golden locks, we love it. But yeah, I don't.
Sunshine.
The sunshine, same effect. We would have had the same outcome.
The only sunshine on Sunday was Trevor Lawrence's hair.
It was. I agree.
So you just noted how Pete said something completely incorrect and how I said a lot of things that you agreed with. So Rachel, who is today's MF double MVP?
RJ.
That's 3 in a row. A hat trick for RJ Ochoa. Rachel Prevet, you are the best. Pete, you are the worst. I want to thank my dog Bear for being quiet in this episode. I want to thank JSpence the King. I'm actually going to break this award into 3 pieces. And Rachel, I'm going to give one to JSpence, but importantly, I'm going to give one to you. The 3 of us, we did it together. Pete, you are left out in the cold.
Bear gets the come up of the week for not barking. I forgot to give that today, and so that's a good reminder.
He didn't even give up the come up, and this guy thinks should be
always
winning awards.
After Sunday night football. I mean, Chiefs play a lot of night games. I don't know if you know this, but I'm a little zoinked, so I forgot to even give out my award, which I remembered at the last second. So if there's one thing I can hang my hat on, it's that the come up of the week streak is alive, and kudos to Bear for taking it home. I hope he has a nice day celebrating.
When Gerald McCoy signed with the Cowboys, which was short-lived, he mentioned he had only ever played 1 game on primetime. And you look at the Bucks, as of late, they're just, you mentioned the Chiefs people, Bucks are on primetime all the time now. Gerald McCoy missed out. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the SB Nation NFL show. Follow Rachel on Twitter, Rachel Monique. Pete is on Twitter at PG Sweeney. I am on Twitter at RJ Ochoa. Pete, Send us home with a rap. You said you knew what the 313 was. Give us a rap.
Okay. 49ers going to church. Listen to that homily. What are they going to do when the Rams come with that Ramily? Monday Night Football tonight.
None of those words rhymed. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next
What
week.
rhymes with orange? Does anything rhyme with orange?